Hello, listeners. This is Nick Zanka, producer of Critical Listening, with a quick editorial note for context. Today's episode is the second of two recorded live in January at ESNS, that's Eurosonic Noorderslag, a music conference held in Groningen in the Netherlands, where Liz and Max participated in several panels, as well as the live taping you're about to hear. If you'd like a little bit more background, check out episode 11. But in this conversation, they speak with Henk Willem Smits, a financial and economic journalist at the Dutch investigative outlet Follow the Money. Liz and Max will get into his recent work after the jump, which includes investigations into private equity firm KKR's acquisition of major European festivals, as well as how successful musicians use the Netherlands as part of international tax strategies. On with the episode.
Okie dokie. It is Critical Listening, episode 12, coming to you live today from ESNS here in Groningen, Netherlands. And with us today, we are thrilled to have our first in-person guest. We've been doing this remotely for several months, and now we had to go overseas to do it in person. We are thrilled to have today investigative journalist Henk Willem Smits. For a little bit of background on Henk, he's a financial and economic journalist at the Dutch investigative outlet Follow the Money, which you can find at ftm.eu. He specializes in tax avoidance by multinationals and wealthy individuals in music and the intersections of private equity and electronic music culture, amongst many other things. Henk, welcome to Critical Listening.
Thank you so much for joining us, Henk. We're
No problem. Thank
really
you.
excited for the conversation. To start, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit of background about what drew you to this specific work that you've been doing for Follow the Money, like this specific beat, if you consider it to be one. I saw in your bio that you previously worked as a pop journalist, which I'm guessing meant like a pop music or pop culture?
Music, yeah, very long time ago. But
Wow.
that's how I started indeed here in Groningen for the local newspaper.
So I was wondering, like, what first inspired you to shift from covering pop music into, for example, investigating the impacts of private equity in music?
I was after I did pop music next to my study, and when my study came to an end, I did a working stage, we call it in Dutch. I don't know the English word.
Your internship?
Internship, exactly. Yeah. So I worked for 3 months at the newspaper in Amsterdam, and there they put me on the finance redactie. And since then, I was always in financial journalism mostly. So, but when I have the possibility, I try to get back to my hobby, music. So it's nice to combine music and the financial stuff.
Well, we love that intersection. We say this is a music, technology, and culture industry hell podcast, and this is a great...
Sounds like something for me, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, which often involves talking about following the money. Can you explain for our listeners a bit about the website where you've been doing some of this work, Follow the Money?
Yeah, Follow the Money now exists for about 15 years. And it's completely paid for by our members. We now have 50,000 members who pay about 100 euros a year. We don't have to make a profit. We also don't have advertisers, no government subsidies. So we are pretty free to write whatever we want.
Mm-hmm. What size staff does that support, roughly?
About 40.
That's
40
amazing.
investigative journalists, yeah, and then you have some staff around. We have a sort of, we want to at least 70% of the money that comes in has to go to journalism.
It's fantastic.
No,
Is that common here?
no, no. With the newspapers, it's way lower because you also need, to sell advertisements, for
Right.
example, and that is. That also that gives you money, but it also costs a lot of money to hire these people that have to get the
amazing.
advertisers in. Yeah.
Is it common for it to not have any government funding? I would always just assume EU that it compared to the states, like get the government funding, but it's having it be completely nonprofit but in a private way. Is that
Yeah.
unique?
That is, I think, pretty unique. Yeah,
Super cool.
in Europe.
So in May 2025, you co-authored the piece "Loud Music, Silent Takeovers: How Private Equity is Reshaping Europe's Festival Scene," which looks at the private equity giant KKR's takeover of the music festival production company Superstruct, which many of our listeners are likely familiar with because of the company's ownership of Boiler Room and the subsequent protests. Can you set the scene here in the Netherlands specifically? What are some of the cornerstones of the music industry here that have been bought out by private equity firms in recent years?
There are two private equity firms that bought up festivals. KKR is one, and another one is a Dutch private equity company that did it in a lot smaller scale, but also bought festivals. They mostly bought dance festivals. So you have the IDT, which Americans might know because of Robert Silliman bought that at a certain moment. IDT you might know from Thunderdome, Mysteryland, Sensation.
So like the big EDM,
big dance things. They also bought the biggest paid festival in the Netherlands. It's called Zwarte Cross. It is in the southeast of the Netherlands, and it's sort of seen as a celebration of local culture, but also with bands and with motocross, which is very popular.
Beautiful intersection, love
Beautiful. And they bought some other a travel agency and a workshop that builds stages.
Everything related to top to bottom related to festivals,
And where a lot of Dutch people also go there too. There is a big festival in Germany called Wacken, which is a metal festival. Wacken
Very
Open
familiar
Air.
with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That they bought, and Siget is a famous festival where also a lot of Dutch people go in Budapest, Hungary. They bought about 80 festivals, mostly in Europe, but also a couple in Australia. Most is dance related, I believe, what they bought. But indeed, Siget or Zwarte Cross or Wacken are different genres.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you a bit about what happens to music festivals when they're taken over by private equity, because oftentimes I think the impacts are downplayed by the owners of the festival themselves. You'll often hear things from sources who say, oh yes, our ownership changed, but nothing's going to change about the festival. This just makes us stable. We're still independent, etc. But in your piece, you interview industry sources who talk about higher ticket prices, more commercial partnerships. And one thing that stuck out to me was that, you mentioned the possibility that private equity pressures incentivizes data mining from Spotify and TikTok. You wrote that this would be in order to, quote, tailor lineups more precisely to audience demand, potentially boosting sales and prices. So one thing, I was curious if that specific point is something that was speculative, or is that something that you directly heard from people in the industry?
Yeah, I heard people say that it's not every organization can mine the data. Of course, you can look at Spotify, what is popular in a certain region. This already happens a lot, of course. You also have bands that they tailor their tour schedule to which regions they are popular or listened to a lot. So that is not strange, of course, that these companies do that too. It also works the other way around. You saw that when you want to buy a ticket now for a Superstruck festival, you have to give a lot of personal data, email addresses and your age and stuff like that, which is, of course, interesting for advertisers.
Yes, everything can be monetized and turned back on you eventually.
Yeah, that is something I noticed about Superstruck. What I noticed most is if you go to their website, it's really a sort of B2B website about activations. They call it brand activations. And
We're
stuff
huge
like
fans
this.
of B2B SaaS over here.
Yeah, we actually, this is a brand activation happening right here. So,
Love that, music community, all about that B2B stuff,
But could you speak to, after writing this piece, what you feel like is the biggest impact actually to the festivals themselves when private equity takes over?
The thing is, they say indeed not so much. It depends also a bit on how profitable your festival is. A lot of festivals, and especially a bit smaller dance festivals, they don't have big margins. It's a very small margin business. So what happens there, you see now, is management layers getting fired. And they put stuff together. So in Spain, for example, famous festival called Sonar is now sort of merged with another festival, at least at directional level. This also happened in the Netherlands. They bought a festival called Digital, which is now merged into ID&T. So that is something that happens a lot, but that is not something the audience notices. What the audience can notice, if you're lucky, they get a big, can get better deals with artists or famous DJs. You can say to Marlon Hofstad, for example, well, I can put you on 10 festivals all over Europe in a package deal.
Gotcha.
So those are things that can happen. What also happens is you see some festivals not being organized. Mysteryland, for example, they skip a year. But the point is we don't notice that much now because this Superstruck started in I believe 2017. Not with KKR, with another private equity group. And they just bought stuff up and didn't do that much. Now they sold that in 2024. It was sold to KKR. We have seen the first festival season now with KKR. The festivals I was at Zwarte Cross. I think nobody noticed that KKR was the owner, because that is also a very successful and busy festival.
They're not going to mess with the motocross for that.
I don't think so. No, I don't think they will change a lot there. Or Wacken Open Air, for example, that is also very profitable, as I understand. So there you probably won't notice.
Do you think that eventually this line of austerity will eventually come for the much larger sort of happenings, or are they really trying to play it close to the chest right now and cautiously as far as the cutting back in noticeable ways for the smaller things and not for the larger things?
They have to increase the margins because they paid a lot of money. They paid more than €1 billion. And I read an analysis of a financial analyst who said that if they want to make that, if they want to get that money back and also make a profit, the EBITDA, as they call it, so the brutto margin has to raise with tens of percents a year.
Tenths of percents.
So that is very ambitious. Very, very ambitious.
Yeah.
And because we know that private equity parties like KKR, they have a horizon. And it's often one you can see it's 5, 6, 7 years. And then they have to sell it with a profit because they're also the fund. The fund ends after 10 years, and then they have to pay the investors back. So there is pressure here. And what you see it happening at the moment is this firing of directors. So we saw it at Sonar, and we see it at Digital at the moment. That there are some cutbacks there. Also, the two founders of Superstruck had also left the company. So there are things going on there. Yeah,
so it's just a classic, like, who's going to hold the bag at the end of 10 years. That's how it works.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to what you feel like the most surprising thing you learned from writing that piece was, and if you feel like there are still any open questions that you feel like are unanswered to you about the relationship between private equity and the live music industry, or perhaps any looming questions you might have for some of the people here at this conference.
Well, I would love to speak to KKR, but they have a sort of policy that they don't talk with the press. At least not on the record. Off the record, they do, and that is but they don't tell that much. But I would love to know, of course, what they think, or if they regret buying Boiler Room. That is, because that is. These protests, I don't know if your listeners know this, but the protests started mostly from the pro-Palestinian activists. This started in Finland, but it went quite under the radar until they bought Boiler Room.
That's just the most international.
Then you have the pro-Palestine activists in Toronto, I believe it started, and then in the UK. Yeah, it would be great to hear from them, of course, how they look back on that acquisition. But no, they don't talk at all. Yeah, which I also find strange, because this KKR is a company that has $600 billion of investments. And then you also have, of course, responsibilities. They also rent out houses at the West Bank, in occupied places in the West Bank, or they have a company. They invest in a company that does that. So, that would be interesting, of course, if they could explain at least why they think they have to do that. But it's a responsibility they don't see and they don't take. And they don't see themselves, obviously, as part of society or so. They're just here to make money. That would be great if they would tell something. You have this Dutch private equity company that they do have a good story. You cannot wonder then if it's a true story.
Right.
But they say, we're here to help these festivals because a lot of them got into trouble because of the corona pandemic. And the margins were already small for a lot of festivals now. And then for 2 years there were no festivals, so they were out of money, a lot of them. Some of them probably wouldn't have survived also if private equity didn't step in. So they had a good story, and there is no controversy about that takeover. The controversy is really about KKR and Israel and Gaza.
Well, you also did a bit of reporting for Follow the Money specifically into the relationship between KKR and Israel, correct?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what you were able to dig up?
So you had this pro-Palestinian activists who pointed at certain companies, which is easily checkable that KKR invests in them. So I wasn't surprised there. What we try to do is to make it sort of complete. And what is now the relationship between KKR and defense companies who are also active in Israel, or at least companies that also do defense, and because KKR doesn't invest in bullet factories, for example. It's mostly high tech, and most of it is dual use, so you can use it in a civilian way and in a military
classic
way.
Military industrial complex. You got the two sides.
Yeah. So we checked that for companies that also do defense and also have an office in Tel Aviv. And we checked how much they invest in tech companies, which is quite big in Israel. You have a big Silicon Valley-like atmosphere there. And then you have two companies, and there are not more than two companies that really are involved in renting out or selling houses on occupied territory in the West Bank. And that is something we checked. Is it bigger or smaller than the activists say? It was quite big actually. Yeah, they're quite big. Invested mostly in this the tech sector in Israel, and this tech sector is very intertwined with the Israeli army. So there is the Israeli army has a lot of hacker style people, mostly involved in tapping phone calls in Gaza. And a lot of what they do is listening into people, and when they are gay, for example, they are getting extorted. They have to, and these people, when they get older, they start their own tech company, or they work for tech companies, or they start investment companies that invest
Right.
in tech.
Starting in public and then going private and then selling the product back to the next generation of the public work.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Symbiosis. Was it really like boiler room as like the tipping point of this because of just how like international spotlight?
At least for me, it was. It started before in Finland, but that I didn't notice. I started to notice. I think it was March of last year that Boiler Room made a statement on Instagram that they distanced themselves from their new owner, and they say, "Yeah, we can't help it," and this is so true. They couldn't help it. Because the founder, at a certain moment, he sold it to Dice, I believe, a ticketing company. And they sold it now to Superstruct last year. And that is when I started to notice. And then I thought, this is... then I started Googling, and then I found out that they also bought ID&T and Zwarte Cross. And then we thought, that is interesting. KKR that bought Zwarte Cross. It's something that I think nobody would think of. Everybody thinks of Zwarte Cross as a sort of hobby project of the organizers to celebrate the local culture, and nobody expected it was this big financial engineering thing behind it. And so the first plan was to go there on Zwarte Cross and then talk to visitors from, do you know who the owner is? But then, because we quickly saw that after this Boiler Room, that they bought Boiler Room, that DJs first started to cancel their shows, not only at Boiler Room but also at Field Day in London, a dance festival. We also had a Dutch musical duo, Animistic Belief. They cancelled their show on Sonar, a prestigious festival in Barcelona. And exactly. Mostly that was the reason to make quickly a story, because then other colleagues of other newspapers can see too what is happening. Yeah, and that first story that came in May. That made a big impact, mostly on Zwarte Cross. Dutch artists started to cancel their show on Zwarte Cross.
It's just as a local festival, like you're saying, just an unusual choice, being that it was like so localized and unique and seemingly like a hobby project, or just, like celebrating this strange intersection. Like I was saying, I'm surprised of just, motocross and music festival, but
Yeah, it's also naive, of course, to think to see it as a hobby project, but this is also something cultivated by the organization itself. But there's about 200,000 people come there, so it was very professional, of course. But the what they pretend, and that goes for a lot of these dance festivals too. There's also, I think they got in trouble. What they pretend is very different than the ownership structure and the financial engineering behind it, and billionaires wanted to make more billions.
What do you feel like the takeaway is for you from this reporting?
What I heard from festival organizers is that when they were first bought by Superstruct, there was this private equity. It's called Providence. It's not that famous as KKR. It is American also, but not as famous as KKR, I think. And they saw, of course, most of these festivals were taken over after the corona pandemic, because there was less money, and what you also saw was huge inflation. I believe that was in the US the same as in Europe. So costs were going up very fast, especially for security and technicians and woodworkers and all these people you need. And also big artists got way more expensive. Also because the management, the William Morrises of the world, they professionalize very fast. So you see these big artists getting also more expensive. So they saw this as an opportunity. If Zwarte Cross can work together with Wacken Open Air, you can have a lot of synergy there. So there is logic to go up in a bigger structure. But they never realize that when you sell your company, you really don't have anything to say about the ownership, at least anymore. And maybe at a certain moment also not at the creative side. But now they all claim that is not the case. But they don't have a say in who Providence sells it to. And now it's KKR, and a lot of musicians don't like KKR. And there's nothing you can do about that. And what I heard of a manager in music is also what he learned. He said from the story was, you have to check the whole chain. So you have to check who's the festival, but also who's the owner of the festival, and who's the owner of the owner. And especially when you work with artists that are engaged or say they are engaged with some topic, that is something to look at. Who's the owner of the owner?
It's my favorite thing of going to like a new amazing venue or festival and just like, who is paying for all of this? This is really cool. I hope it's not something evil compounded by something more evil that is getting a tax write-off for something very interesting,
No.
Well, I feel like it also speaks to just what happens when things become too big, right? Like sometimes I wonder, you have this very big music festival and then you'll hear owners say things like, oh, well, we had to sell the company because we wouldn't have been able to sustain it otherwise. But maybe an alternative is that this didn't need to be that big and you could have scaled it back. Or sometimes another answer is maybe this doesn't need to exist.
Yeah, maybe. Well, that is especially in the Netherlands. I don't know how it is in the US, but the Netherlands has a lot of festivals, especially dance festivals. I believe the most per capita in the world. So in the Netherlands it really is cutthroat business. And you can wonder if they're all needed, indeed. But if you're the founder of a festival, you want your child to live on, of course.
But the endless growth model rather than like a sustainable, maybe we can continue to own it or not feel this pressure to, we have to sell it off in order to continue this endless growth.
Yeah.
Yeah, or if you had like independent festivals cooperating with each other instead of competing against each other,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That probably also will happen, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You think that there's we're seeing, at least in the States, there's plenty of boiler room alternatives popping up, even like in direct juxtaposition to a boiler room programming existing in a city. There will be like a counter rave or something like that. Do you see like Liz was saying, like you were saying, like the alternatives not scaling upwards but becoming more common in Europe as well in relation to that in the dance music side?
Yeah. No, I don't know. I know there was one dance festival in Amsterdam that was severely hit by cancellations of artists. It's called Milkshake. It's a bit like Mighty Hoopla in the UK. So it is a very queer. It's a queer thing. And there was a counter rave, I believe, by the people who cancelled their show. They did a sort of how do you call it, to raise money for themselves, a show somewhere else. Yeah.
Just feels like playing with fire, because this music, specifically in electronic music, it's so politicized.
Yeah.
Inherently so.
I'm really wondering if KKR, because the people that work for KKR are really smart. They are Harvard graduates in econometry and they're really rocket scientists who put everything in the spreadsheet. And I wonder if they put this in the spreadsheet. That
There
if
you
you
go.
do that with festivals like Milkshake, if you do that with queer things or with dance things, where people are really engaged and not only for the show, but they really mean it, that this can happen. And I think they didn't, but yeah, like I said, they don't talk to me. So
No, they couldn't afford a consultant that knows anything about electronic music. You know, they're austere.
yeah, yeah. No, I wonder if when Providence sold this to KKR, if they told this that this could happen.
Hey, by the way, here's the entire history of electronic music for
yeah,
you.
yeah.
So you mentioned that either today or at some other point in this conference, you're going to be in conversation with the owner of a festival that was bought by private equity and then spun out
Yeah,
independently. Can you talk a
which
bit
is
about that?
yeah, Siget is the biggest festival in Europe. It's 6 days and 400,000 visitors. I don't know how much they count double then, but it is huge. And it was one of the first festivals actually that Superstruck bought. Right before the corona, I believe, 2018, 2019. And last year the Superstruct wanted to cancel it, at least for a year. And then it completely spun off. But why that exactly happened, I don't know. You do see, like I said, there is a bigger shake-up going on within Superstruct. So yeah, probably this wasn't profitable enough, but yeah, I hope to hear this afternoon what happened there.
500,000 people coming to the festival, not big enough, you know, having
You would think you sell a lot of beer then.
Come on, man.
But
They haven't implemented enough AI solutions.
Should have gone to the conferences yesterday, man. There was a
Nah.
whole lot of solutions.
So we also would love to ask you some questions about some reporting you've done on a different topic, which is tax avoidance. You did a piece in 2021 called Disco Leaks, how ABBA, Julio Iglesias, two Beatles, and dozens of other stars used the Netherlands to avoid paying taxes. How? Can you tell us a little bit about the origins of a piece like this and, like, you know, where this came from as a story for you?
Well, I'm always. I write a lot about the Netherlands as a tax haven. This is, by the way, interesting about Superstruct. The first thing the Superstruct did was move to Luxembourg. So all these festivals in Spain and England and Netherlands that were local taxpayers now don't pay tax anymore locally, but in Luxembourg where it's obviously way lower. But the Netherlands looks a bit like Luxembourg. It's the same sort of tax haven. And especially it is interesting for people who own intellectual property, like songs. Because royalties can flow in and out of the Netherlands tax-free. And the Netherlands is also not really known as a tax haven. So the way it was used, that is getting less. But the way musicians use it was that they got their royalties, from Germany and France, and they collected that in the Netherlands in a company limited in the Netherlands. And because it was a royalty flow, it could flow in at least tax-free. At least the Netherlands didn't tax it. Maybe there was a sort of tax. In some countries have that. That they have a source tax, but mostly these countries have a deal with the Netherlands, which is called a bilateral tax treaty, where these kind of taxes are often maximized at 5%, so pretty low. And you can also move the royalties tax-free out of the Netherlands. So there's no source tax in the Netherlands, and then you can bring it to a really low-tax country.
Right. Yeah, I mean, most of our listeners are probably American or more familiar with something like Puerto Rico being, probably our listeners know I lived there for a while, and that was, that's a, like, number one, like, corny crypto bro haven right now. And I just, completely unfamiliar with this from the Dutch perspective.
Yeah, Puerto Rico, I don't know if that is used from the Netherlands, but Cyprus, for example, is of course...
Yes, I know about that, yes.
Because there the taxes now it's changing a bit because of new international rules, but they had income tax of 10% or something like that, very low compared to most other countries.
You just named like all of the places where Daniel Ek and Martin Lawrenson, the founders of Spotify, have their money. Cyprus, Luxembourg.
Yeah, no, it's not a coincidence.
Yeah, wow, so crazy.
Real bastions of underground music culture. You know?
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
I'd be curious again, like what you feel like you learned while reporting this. Was there anything that surprised you?
Yes and no, because now the thing I did, that's why it calls the disco leaks, because I used the website Discogs, or I don't know how you say it in English.
Discogs.
Oh, Discogs. Okay.
But that doesn't sound nice in Dutch, so I made it Disco Leaks, but it's actually the Discogs Leaks.
I love that was the smoking gun. Yeah.
Because Discogs, you probably know, but for the listeners who don't know, is mostly user-generated website that collects information about records and CDs. And people are really encouraged to note as much metadata as possible. So also, for example, publishing, the publishing companies or the publishing limiteds. And the Dutch limiteds are called BV, which means besloten vennootschap. And on Curaçao it's called NV, naamloze vennootschap, and that is not used in any other country. So you couldn't do this for Cyprus, for example, because they use LTD, like the UK, and so that is important. But here it was easy, so we scraped Discogs, and we cut all the data off. And then we put it in Excel, and then just with the find function, we find BV and NV. And this is how we found these publishing companies of a lot of big stars, from Vangelis to Teresa Teng, for a famous Taiwanese pop star.
So for the metadata nerds out there, know that this is your work, scrobbling and writing all the info about your favorite records that you own might serve journalists down the line.
Definitely. Discogs is a great site.
Just to wrap it, we started the conversation asking what originally drew you to this work, but sometimes that could be different from what continues to draw you to this line of work, knowing your musical background as well. So what motivates your interest today in this subject moving forward?
These rights things are getting way more interesting because of the streaming and Spotify mostly, of course, and what they do, all the dumping AI slop, especially in the free version, as I understand it. So they have to pay the artist less. That is of course a very interesting thing. What is going to happen in the near future?
Cool. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us. Is there anything else you'd want to plug or shout out? Anything new you're working on?
Now I'm working on tax evading multinationals. Not so much musicians. Also because musicians use the Netherlands less, at least as far as I see now. But maybe I'm wrong. They're inventive, these tax advisors. So I'm mostly with multinational companies. Check our website ftm.eu and if you can miss it, become a member, because we need every member we can get to stay as independent as we are.
Yeah, and it's not just a Dutch exclusive.
No,
topics,
it's in English language too. We have a .nl, which is Dutch, and we have ftm.eu, which is in English. Yeah.
Well, I think people in the United States are starting to trust international media a little bit more than what we have. So hopefully the message will resonate.
Yeah, can we stay here?
I can imagine. It's.
I need healthcare.
Could we close it out by asking you to maybe recommend some Dutch music?
Dutch music.
Yeah.
I like. There are some great Dutch record stores, at least. One in Groningen too, called Hemmers. I'd like to come. Rush Hour and Bordello a Parigi in Amsterdam are great record stores. Also, bringing out a lot of the music from Dutch people. Yeah, Arp Freak is Arp Freak and the Perpetual Singers. That is then a nice tip. It's a band from Rotterdam, and it's a bit gospel infused house.
Oh, nice.
And Latin, and that is a very nice band to check. Yeah.
So no Gabber, or however you pronounce it.
I like to listen it from time to time. I used to like it when I was a teenager.
It's definitely a niche.
It is a very typical Dutch. I think it's the most Dutch thing the Dutch ever brought to pop music. Yeah.
It's one of my favorites. Just a bunch of like 6'5" guys, just like.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It is. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Henk.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Critical Listening Podcast. The show was written and created by Liz Pelly and Max Alper, and produced and engineered by Nick Zanka. You can support the show by joining the Patreon at patreon.com/criticallistening, where you'll have early access to episodes before they hit the public platforms, as well as our Discord community. Our theme song is the track Talk to Me by the band Eraser, and for some local Dutch color, this episode featured Gabber tracks by Tony Montana and Sergei Volkov.